the northeastern states. I'm on the policy team at Rewiring America, where we strategize and promote policies at every level of government. And we're trying to favor efficient electric machines over polluting ones. Rewiring America was a big reason of why we have the Inflation Reduction Act today. Our philosophy and that of the Inflation Reduction Act is based in the science of using electricity powered by renewables instead of using fossil fuels in our daily lives for things like heating and transportation. Because when we burn fossil fuels directly in engines or heating systems, it creates a lot of pollution. And generating electricity is inherently cleaner and more efficient. I'm going to give a broad overview of the consumer incentive programs from the Inflation Reduction Act. But just know there's a lot to the IRA beyond consumer incentives. It also spurs US manufacturing, creates well-paying jobs, and helps businesses in addition to households. If you wouldn't mind moving to the next slide. So when the Inflation Reduction Act passed in 2022, it really marked a new era in climate action that we've never seen before. After 2 decades of essentially inaction at the federal level, we finally have substantial funding to decarbonize the most polluting sectors of our economy. And building electrification got big support. So the IRA has jump-started the electrification movement in 4 ways. On the consumer side, you have rebates, tax credits, and low-cost financing. On the supply side, you have tax credits, incentives, financing, and workforce development funding. And I'll go through what these look like more specifically. Next slide. So let's start with the tax credits. Both tax credits 25C and 25D are available now for all households. 25C is a 30% tax credit for residential efficiency and electrification upgrades up to $3,200 per year. The purchase and installation of heat pump water heaters qualify for up to a $2,000 tax credit per year. And these are available up until 2032 with no cap on funding. Next slide. 25D, the rooftop solar tax credit, just like 25C, is a 30% tax credit, but this one is for rooftop solar, battery storage, and geothermal heating. And it includes electrical panel upgrades if needed for any of these mentioned technologies. It also covers the purchase and installation costs. So you can use it to help pay for installation. And like 25C, it's available until 2032 for anyone with enough federal tax liability. Next slide. So here are the specific breakdowns of what the tax credits can be used for, so you can refer back to it later. As you see on the right, 25D, these are just some of the popular residential projects that qualify for the tax credit. You can think of these as anything related to solar or ground geothermal heating. And then on the left, it's a breakdown of heat pump water heaters, and weatherization. So things that make the home more efficient, like insulation, energy audits, etc. Next slide. Now onto the consumer rebates, which are a little bit more complicated. Tax credits are unfortunately limited in who they can help because they're limited to those with a tax liability. So most low-income households don't have this level of tax liability, and that's where the consumer rebates come in and prioritize low-income households. So this consumer rebate federal money is distributed by the US Department of Energy, but the design and implementation of the federal rebate programs is in the hands of the states. So the states, territories, and tribes submit implementation blueprint plans for their home energy rebate programs. And these include community benefits plans, education outreach strategies, and consumer protection plans. And the rebates roll out on a state-by-state basis. I'll show you a map shortly, with timing and structure of the programs varying across states. And each program is customized by the states to address the specific needs of the states and territories, which means that there could be significant differences in eligibility criteria, the types of projects that are covered, the types of building types that are able to be covered, and the rebate claiming process. And some of the program eligibility is income-based. So with that out of the way, HERE program, that's the first one. This stands for the home, this one. This stands for the Home Electrification Appliance Rebates. This is a total of $4.5 billion in point of sale rebates up to $14,000 for electric appliances, including heat pump water heaters, electric or induction stoves, heat pump clothes dryers, electrical panel upgrades, weatherization, and home wiring. And 50% of the rebates must be reserved for low-income households. Up to 100% of the project costs can be covered for low-income households and 50% for moderate income households. And contractors are eligible for up to $500 per project. But it's $150 for heat pump water heaters. So that amount varies depending on the project. Next slide. Now the Home Efficiency Rebates Program, or HERE, is $4.3 billion in rebates for whole home retrofits. These can be modeled or measured to improve a home's energy efficiency, and all households are eligible. According to DOE, the states can narrow in that eligibility. So some states might choose to further target specific populations or geographies or housing types. Contractors are also eligible for up to $200 per project if the projects are located in disadvantaged communities. Next slide. So this is just a screenshot of DOE's website. Last time it was updated was a few days ago on July 19th. So it shows that state energy offices are in different stages of implementation of the home rebate programs. Some have applied and were approved by DOE. Some have applied but haven't been approved yet. Some haven't applied and are still developing their application. Some are still developing their implementation blueprint, which also needs to be approved by DOE in order for them to roll the program out. And in green, you can see New York is the only state that has stood up a program so far. Next slide. So this is just meant to illustrate what it looks like for a family to use these incentives. So we'll call them the Colemans. They have a household income of $68,000 a year, and they live in a 3-bedroom, 1-bath, 1,300 square foot home built in 1966, and they want to go electric for climate reasons. So in 2023, they switched from a dirty electricity to a community solar program, which was no higher in cost. In 2024, they replaced their electric resistance furnace and central AC with a central heat pump. And using the HERE rebates, they got $8,000 off. And using 25C tax credit, they got 30% off the cost after the rebate was applied, which is an extra $2,000, making the final cost of the heat pump $5,000. They got weatherization to help insulate their home and reduce energy bills with a rebate that covered the $1,600 weatherization costs. The next year in 2025, they want to replace their electric resistance water heater with a heat pump water heater. They get $1,750 off with the rebate and $765 from the tax credit. So it ends up being $1,785. And then 3 years later, they use 25E tax credit to get $4,000 off a used EV. And they use 30C to get $150 off an EV charger. You can see from this that this is these programs are very capable of changing people's real lives and also incentivizing the use of efficient electric appliances over our traditional fossil fuel appliances. Next slide. So the state-based home energy efficiency contractor training programs also give financial assistance to states to develop and implement workforce programs, as we need the workforce to actually transition this whole economy and do the work that's needed to make the transition happen. So this training grant program gives training and education to contractors involved in energy efficiency or electrification upgrades, including through the IRA rebate programs. The near-term goals that we can expect is reducing the cost of training contractor employees, testing and certifying the contractors training under these state programs. We can expect there to be more partnerships with nonprofits to develop and implement state programs, and also preparing workers and businesses for energy efficiency and electrification measures that are funded through DOE home energy rebate programs. And the long-term goals are to, diversify the energy efficiency workforce and provide economic mobility for underrepresented workers. It's also meant to stimulate high-quality contracting in the residential sector. And this program has $20 million through fiscal year 2031. So contractors can receive up to $500 per project for electrification rebates and $200 for projects in disadvantaged communities for efficiency rebates, which I mentioned before. Next slide. So states can use this funding to help reduce the cost of training contractor employees, provide testing and certification of contractors trained and educated under a state program, or they can use it to partner with nonprofits on programs on both reducing the cost of training and certification programs. This also complements funds authorized for workforce training in the bipartisan infrastructure law, which haven't talked about today, but is a whole other amazing federal law that was passed under the Biden administration. And through this, designing workforce programs with these purposeful initiatives is meant to have a ripple effect through the economy and provide access to opportunities and create a more diverse coalition of workers and contractors together to deliver these programs. States can start identifying their needs now and determine how to best use their funds to grow the workforce and complement their own existing state efforts. Next slide. So this is just my contact info. I'm going to pass it back to Sam to talk about how the IRA consumer incentives are being actually deployed and benefiting the state of Connecticut.
All right. Thanks so much, Amanda. Hi, everybody. I'm Sam Danowski, the State Director of Sierra Club's Connecticut chapter. And let's jump right in with why this is important for Connecticut and what's happening here. As Amanda said, the IRA is the largest investment in climate that the United States has ever had. And electrification will move us away from polluting infrastructure, appliances, and that's so important for Connecticut because right now in buildings, HVAC and water heating is 30% of all of our greenhouse gas emissions. It's also 28% of all of our NOx emissions, which is more than 8 times all our power plants combined. So cleaning up the pollution from our homes is really important. Connecticut, for the home rebates alone, is expected to get just shy of $100 million. So as Amanda said, there's the HERE rebates and the HER rebates. We're getting about well, exactly an equal amount of each, close to 50 million of each, and those will be available over 6 years. As soon as the program starts, which we're anticipating 2025 through 2031. It is a great deal of money, but I also want to put it in perspective. Our energy efficiency program has an annual expenditure of about $250 million a year. And we know based on some potential scenarios that DEEP offered that if they designed the program to have a 14,000 max rebate, it would serve over the 6 years of its time about 2,547 households. So how they develop the program is pretty important, and they've been really intentional about thinking about it. And one thing they are thinking about is that we don't have this funding. While this funding is kind of in a silo, it's not the only thing we have. And so how do we stack these programs together to get the best outcomes? And so some of the other funding we have, as I mentioned, our state energy efficiency program, which is Energize Connecticut, which has had a long and successful history of reducing energy use. We also have the Weatherization Assistance Program, the REPS program, which is a new program that Connecticut stood up to address barriers in weatherization. It's a remediation program, and LIHEAP, the Low Income Heating Energy Assistance Program. Those are all programs that we can be thinking about how to stack with our IRA rebates. Earlier this year, Connecticut was awarded $62 million in the Inflation Reduction Act Solar for All program. And just yesterday, exciting news, Connecticut was awarded over $700 million, along with our regional other states in our region for climate pollution reduction grants. And that includes $450 million for heat pumps, which we learned yesterday would probably be about $100 million for Connecticut for heat pumps through that program alone. So what's happened here in Connecticut so far? We do not, like Amanda said, New York is the only state that is actually issuing rebates right now. We do not have a program design that's been applied for. What we do know is DEEP is the ultimate decision maker on how the program is set up. They had received in September 2024. They indicated they would be applying and got the administrative funding to set up the program. They contracted with an outfit out of Vermont, BEIC, to develop the proposal, and they began that contract in March 2024. In May, they held a technical session asking a lot of questions about what stakeholders wanted to see in the program. They had a public comment period that ended June 7th. They have a website, so you can kind of follow along what's happening if you go to that website. So that's where we are. We expect, I don't have a timeline for when the program design is going to be submitted, but I think roughly we're thinking that the program would begin at the beginning of next year. And just a little bit what's next and how you can play a role here. One is that the program design application is submitted, and we all get a better understanding of what it looks like. Then we would expect the award to be announced and the program to begin. All of those are to be determined. But we think it's really important that folks know about these rebates and are able to take advantage of it. So when the announcements come out, we'll be getting the word out at Sierra Club. Imagine CTLCV will as well, and Rewiring America. You know, if you see the announcements out there, share them. We have been doing presentations like this on the Inflation Reduction Act in communities in person. If you would like to talk about setting one up in your community, let me know. And one other, the tell your story is the last bullet on how you can help. If you have used the Inflation Reduction Act, whether a rebate, when they come, or a tax credit, or you've electrified something in your life, whether it's a vehicle or a hot water heater, or heat pumps, and want to tell your story, it's something that other folks can really relate to. The policy is really important, but hearing that someone else in your community has made the transition and how they did it is always really inspiring. So my contact information is there. I'd love to hear from you. And then I'll pass it to Juliana for the questions.
Great. Thank you both so much for such a great presentation. We're going to move into questions now. So if anyone has any questions, please add them into the chat and then we will get to all of them. But we did have a first question and it said, do the incentives for panel upgrades include upgrading electric service?
What do you mean by electric service? I'm sorry, I think I might have misunderstood the question.
You want to follow up on that question, you can send that in the chat and then I can wait till they follow up and we can go from there. Are there any incentives for community small scale wind? If any of you, either of you know.
I don't know about small scale. The 30% the investment tax credit, which I didn't talk about because it's not for consumers, is a 30% tax credit for investments in wind, among other renewables like solar and energy storage. So yes, that, but I'm not sure how small you're talking. I'm sure there's some sort of like megawatt requirement, that it probably has to generate a certain amount of electricity.
Thank you. And if anyone has questions, we can put them in the chat as well. And there was a follow-up on that first question about electric service. So they said upgrading electric service means getting the utility to increase the available apparatus to your panel. That was a follow-up on do the incentives for panel upgrades include upgrading electric service?
Yes, that's what I thought you meant, but then I was thinking maybe it had to do with like a utility plan. But yes, most of the electric service work would be increasing the amperage of your panel because you're going to have the home using more electricity than it was. So that's definitely included.
Great, thank you. Sam, I think this one might be good for you. Someone has been told that heat pumps don't work well for climates such in Connecticut. Do you have any comments on that?
Yes, I have a lot of comments on that. Thank you for the question, though. It's a really important one, and a lot of people ask it. And I think that information gets out there. But there are cold climate heat pumps, and it's really been a game changer over the last decade in heat pump technology, making them very usable and efficient at temperatures well below zero. I think perhaps the early heat pumps many decades ago, that was true, that heat pumps didn't work well in cold climates, but it is not true anymore. In fact, states that are really leading on this include Maine, where they have already installed over 125,000 heat pumps and are aiming for another 175,000 more And they're working really well there. And if they can work well in Maine, they can work well here.
Amanda, do you have any comments on that?
No, I think Sam said it perfect.
Okay, great. Another one for maybe Sam and Amanda. This one's Connecticut specific, but what was the DEEP proposal that was sent out for the public comment period that ended in June? How did they propose to spend the funds?
Yeah, I'm happy to take the one. Another great question. So DEEP, I think, can be commended for being very thoughtful about this. They did not put out a specific proposal, but they did provide a number of questions for feedback from stakeholders, from everything from how to focus the rebates based on demographics and income, how to focus rebates based on the type of rebates they might focus on, such as heat pumps, heat pump hot water heaters, wiring. They took stakeholder input on contractor incentives. And so they did not lay out a they didn't lay out a proposal that was just going to move forward. They really intentionally asked a lot of questions and took the information and data back and provided the participants with data that was really helpful. I know it was helpful for me as I was thinking about how to, answer some of the questions. And I'm going to put in the chat the website where their portal is at, so you can see there is the notice for that technical meeting and kind of how they laid it out and the questions they asked, and all of their comments that they receive and filings are public, and so you can see how people responded to the stakeholder input requests. I think it's been a really good and collaborative process, I found.
Thank you. In response to the workforce, is there any subsidies for installation or any incentives to hire union workers at all through that workforce part you had talked about?
Yeah, I have a couple links on that. The IRA is definitely has a lot of provisions on prevailing wage and project labor agreements, and the overall goal is to hire union labor or the closest thing to like labor agreements that protect workers. In June of this year, the Department of Treasury and the IRS issued some rules to implement a prevailing wage and registered apprenticeship provisions that are mentioned in the IRA legislation. And that includes a project labor agreements. But the specific state implementation and design of the rebate programs, there's a certain, there's a floor, but there's not a ceiling, I would say. They have to follow certain things that are in the IRA, but they can go beyond and include greater protections for labor. So it's up to the states themselves, and sounds like Connecticut's still in the process of designing. So that feedback would be very important for DEEP to hear too.
Great. Do you have any comments on that, Sam, or should we move on to the next question? Move on? Okay. Is there a subsidy for installation of solar on church? I skipped ahead earlier and went to this one, but if either of you can answer that one.
Sam, have you heard of that? I do think there's specifics for houses of worship in the IRA, but I'm not exactly sure.
Well, there's the direct pay. So there are options within the Inflation Reduction Act if there's these tax rebates, but if you don't have taxable income, how do you access it? And there is a program called direct pay that I would think houses of worship would qualify for.
And I have a resource and I will put that in the chat after. Thank you. Next question, which is pretty timing. Will the tax incentives and IRA money still be in play after the election, no matter who wins? That one's asked a couple of times.
Yeah, I can start and then maybe Sam can add to it that the further you are in the state rebate program design and implementation process, the more secure the funds are. So like funds have already been committed in New York State, those can't be taken back. I think if you have applied for early administrative funding, that funding is already in play. So in short, it's pretty safe. And 46 out of our 50 states and additional territories have shown interest by applying and engaging with DOE. So there's pretty overwhelming support from the states about getting this federal funding to increase efficiency, to spur jobs, to expand renewable energy and electrification. It's highly unlikely that something that's this popular can be taken back. And like I said, a certain amount, a certain number of states have already, submitted plans and gotten their applications approved, and there's no pulling back on that train.
Any comments, Sam?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think there's but there is also like the state of Connecticut claws back money that's not spent often. So I think like getting the applications in and beginning to issue rebates is critically important to do quickly. Just to add a protection against that possibility.
Great, thank you. That was a hot topic in the chat. Next question, is there a list of approved and vetted vendors to work through for these rebates and services? Anything specific to Connecticut that you know of?
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that question, and thanks for it. So I guess I put it in two buckets. One is the tax credits. So anyone can go to any vendor you want for a tax credit. And you just apply for it on your taxes. So there is no list in that case. But for the rebates that go through the state energy office, the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, there will be an RFP, request for proposal, for vendors for the program. Whatever program they stand up, it will not be a free-for-all, so that they will review the vendors. And very likely there'll be synergies with our state energy efficiency program, Energize Connecticut, which has a list of approved vendors that they work with. So that's how we expect the rebate portion of it to work in terms of the vendors.
Thank you. Another question, what is the subsidy for an induction range for a high income person?
That'll be dependent on how Connecticut designs its programs. I'm not sure how high income you're talking, but that is a question that Connecticut's probably working on figuring out now with its eligibility criteria. Do you have more on that, Sam?
I do not. We'll have to wait for the program to unfold. So other than the tax credit and what's allowable, those we know, but we don't know how the state is gonna design the program for rebates for induction.
Great.
I will say we do have in our energy efficiency program that already exists, however, they do have rebates for induction stoves.
Great, thanks. So another question is, are there any resources out there where people can find out where they can find direct incentives or how much they can save on electrifying their home at all? Like, how can they put those costs into like a number that they can look at now? I believe Rewiring has some resources if you wanted to go over those on your website.
Yeah, I am looking for our tool right now. We have an incentive calculator that we're hoping it began with just the IRA incentives, but we're trying to layer the different state incentives on top of that, and also local and utility incentives. It's like a state by state process. But I will find that for you. And once you have it in your hands, it's pretty self-explanatory. You put your household income, your zip code, and the kind of project that you're interested in, and you can see how much you'll save.
And we can add that in the follow-up email for anyone to use if you wanted to use that as well. Sam, do you have any comments on that one?
No, I just say click on it. That has been a really it was amazing that Rewiring America was able to pull that together so quickly. A great team, and it's a great tool.
It really is a great tool. I have fun kind of flicking through it as well. One more question I have, and if anyone has any more, please add them in the chat. If someone who is buying a home and is kind of renovating the home and they want to add solar panels and heat pumps, should they do both at the same time, or should they do one over the other before anything? Kind of a personal question I got, but do you have any advice there for a new homeowner?
I would just say my general advice with everything having to do with efficiency and electrification is Connecticut has a terrific efficiency program, Energize Connecticut. Every ratepayer pays into it, and everyone can use it. And as a first step, energy efficiency should always be the first thing you do, because you don't want to like put in a heat pump when your house is inefficient and the heat is going out into the cold. So start there would be my recommendation. The energy efficiency program also has what they call a concierge service, which sounds so fancy, but it's really someone who can help you think through the steps and the order that you want to go in, and also has knowledge about both the energy efficiency program and what tax credits are out there.
Thank you. I had another question come through. What documentation is required to apply for a rebate?
Oh, sorry, Sam, go ahead.
Oh, I'll let you go. As I understand it, it's just a receipt from the contractor, but I haven't done it myself, so please add more.
Yeah, I think it's a point of sale rebate, and that it shouldn't take much more than a receipt and an application. But different states are going to have different processes for, especially if there's an income eligibility factor where you need to prove that you're income eligible to access a certain percentage of the rebate, because it's different for lower income and moderate income. There might be additional processes for that, but definitely recommending that states find a way to make that as easy and simple and streamlined as possible, possibly by stacking incentives so that folks don't need to be showing their eligibility and having to prove their income several times over.
Great, thank you. That was the last question that I got in the chat. So I believe
I saw one more that I was ready to answer, which was, does the tax credit apply for Connecticut income tax and not federal? And so we've been talking about the two programs. So just to emphasize, there are the tax credits, and those are federal tax credits. So if you go the tax credit route, it's a federal tax credit. The rebates are designed and implemented at the state level. So you could potentially have a rebate and a tax and the tax credit. But the rebates would be coming through the state program, but all the tax credits are all federal.
Sorry, I missed that one. Another one came in as you were answering that, which is great. If you install rooftop solar, the utility size is the max system you can obtain based on your usage. Therefore, the size of the system may be less than the roof area can support. If you replace a fossil furnace with a heat pump, that increases your load. Something I don't know is if they will let you use anticipated future load in the calculation.
That's a great question. And something I don't know the answer to. We should get that answer and send it back out to folks.
Yeah, we can definitely follow up. I'll be adding their contact information in the follow-up email as well. So if you want to follow up, you can. Do either of you want to define low income when it comes to the incentives in the home energy rebates? What defines low income?
Yeah. Low income is households that make less than 80% of their area median income. And moderate households make 80 to 150% of their area median income. I can put that in the chat since.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? If you want to put them through the chat, feel free to go ahead. Great, I don't think I missed any. All right. Well, if anyone has any other questions, you can always follow up with me, Sam, or Amanda, and we can follow up with you after this. But I just wanted to thank you all for joining, and thank you, Sam and Amanda, for such a great presentation. I know this is really helpful for a lot of people trying to understand this process and what to do and how to be better citizens and be more green. So I hope this was helpful to everyone that was here. This is being recorded, so we are gonna share it out and then share the slide decks with everyone. So if you have any follow-up questions, you can look at the slides or follow up with any of us three and we can go from there. So I'm gonna stop recording.